Not sure how this is going to go. This is the first time live feed for me. This is going to be a little bit different from my regular videos. The other videos I shoot with a high definition camera. This is just my cell phone. So the quality is not quite as good, but this is going to be a little bit of the behind the scenes. So that this is the stuff that you don't see in the videos. If you watch my videos, you see that they're all nice and tight cropped and cut and edited and stuff. So this will show you the real layout room. I'm going to wait just a couple of minutes for a few more people to join us. I've got my wife helping me here. So if you post comments, she'll try to pass them on to me because I'm trying to run the camera and the trains and everything else. So good evening. Good evening. Hey, John, how you doing there? How's the sound there working out on that end? Hey, Scott, how you doing? Good to have you joining me here. We've got the world famous Scott Thornton from the Proto Throttle. Okay. We've tried this. This is about as good as it's going to get. So you got to crank your speakers up a little bit louder, probably a little bit louder than normal, but I'm going to try to talk loud enough. Hopefully you guys can pick it up here. Well, you guys are coming in fast and furious. Hi to everybody. Hope everybody's doing well and taking advantage of some of this time to do some modeling. How you doing, Stefan? That's better. Okay, good. Well, I'm going to keep trying to talk a little loud as we move the camera around. I've tried a couple of test feeds, and again, the volume was a little bit loud. Oh, we got somebody all the way in New Zealand. Well, if you can hear me in New Zealand, I guess we're doing pretty good. I'm going to wait just another minute or so for a few more people to join up. Hey, Tom, how you doing there in Texas? All right, loud and clear. All right, great. In Quebec, thanks for joining me from Quebec. All right. Well, just kind of giving you a little plan of what the evening's going to involve. As you guys can, as I show you some stuff, you can ask questions. That way, there saves having to do comments later. And again, my wife is going to try to help me out here by passing along questions if I don't see them popping up on the screen here because they roll off pretty fast. What I was going to do was give you a little tour of the layout, kind of show you again a little bit of the behind the scenes. If you haven't seen my layout, it was featured in Great Model Railroads 2020, and you can take a look at the track plan there. If not, if you don't have that issue, go to my website thomasklamowski.com, and you can see the track plan and a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, just go over there and check it out. But the layout is in a 9'2" by 10'6" room, basically a glorified closet. That's pretty much what it was originally designed for in the house, and I'd made it just a little bit bigger to accommodate the trains. And what we're going to do is just kind of tour the layout, and I'm going to start over here at the end. This is the peninsula. I'm going to try to pan slowly here so that you don't get too dizzy. And again, I've got to move the camera around as I'm working around the layout. This is the end of the peninsula. This is Emery's, which represents a marble dust loading facility that's in Marble Hill, Georgia. The actual facility is huge. They receive calcium, or they ship out calcium carbonate, which is basically marble dust, and that's used in a bunch of different products from paint to toothpaste to a bunch of other industrial uses. The stuff that's shipped out of this facility here in Georgia is the industrial grade. It's not food grade. So again, I was able to get that information. I tried to talk my way onto the facility to get a tour, but again, security being what it is, they wouldn't allow it because they needed corporate permission. So this is a rough approximation of what the facility looks like. Absolutely, that's a Broadway Limited trackmobile. And it does run. I'll run it here and for you in just a second. So, and then the next facility over here, again, it's in a compressed area, but this is the old Georgia Marble facility, which has gone through a couple different names. Um, right now, I think it's Polycore. Again, every week they change the name. The interesting part here is that they have a large pit that they mine out marble slabs and marble chips. The marble slabs that were here are a lot of them went to Washington D.C. or in the monuments and in the National Cemetery. So the Marble Hill area is very proud of that information, and they're very proud of having Georgia marble in Washington D.C. and all the monuments. Let's see if I can run the trackmobile here for you for a second. I do have frog juicers on the turnouts because again, this thing is very, very finicky. We're going to have to get a little bit of gear noise there, but not too bad. And when the crews start off this job, what they do is they start off working with the trackmobile, and you move the cars from Emery's over to the runaround track, which is where the trackmobile is right now. Oh, thanks. Yeah, the marble slabs are actually marble tiles from Home Depot, and 1x2 tiles. So I switched them up and cut them off the mat. And again, we basically would come over here, move the tank car, move whatever we need out onto the runaround track, and spot them up here. And then the trackmobile goes over and tucks into the facility there, so the local can pick it up. That pretty much replicates what happens out there on the Georgia Northeastern. I was fortunate to be able to ride with the crew when they went down and switched this area, and all the cars for pickup are spotted up on a runaround track outside the facility, and they use a trackmobile to move them from the loading spot out onto the runaround track where Georgia Northeastern picks them up. Again, I had to compress the distance between Georgia Marble and Emery's, but again, it's pretty similar to the way they have it set up there. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slide down just a little bit further, and you guys can see the marble slabs here. And again, apologize. You're live. You guys still there? Hey, there we go. Oh, this is, yeah. Well, I'm going to have to apologize in advance. As you guys probably figured out, we're out in the mountains, and the internet here is not the greatest. And we call and complain, and our internet company says you're at the end of the line. That's as good as it's going to get. So we take what we can get at this point and deal with it. So sorry for the interruption. Again, if it drops back out, try to be patient. Well, let's see. Is it still you guys still there? Okay, good. Give it a second here. We're lagging behind on my screen. Okay. Well, thanks again for your patience here. Let's see here. All right. We're going to try to continue here. All right. This is where they load the marble chips. There's a big ramp where a truck backs up and dumps them into the hopper cars. And again, they use a front end loader. And if you notice over here, the front end loader has a coupler on the back. And that was courtesy of a picture from Tim Garland. So that's how they would move the cars. Now they move them only when they're empty. They don't move them when they're loaded because they're too heavy. All right, so coming around here, this is a beautiful waterway, but it's called Long Swamp Creek. It It's a nice little creek. The name doesn't do it any justice. And then over here, we've got a couple of houses. Again, a little hard to see here, but those are laser cut wood kits. And then in the back, you got some tomato plants and some little details there, mailboxes, people, dogs, that kind of stuff. And then you work your way down here into the yard. Yes, it is. This is based off the Georgia Northeastern. Obviously, the track plan has been much compressed. It's almost 100-mile long short line that runs from Marietta, Georgia, all the way up to the state line there in Tennessee. And I chose to model primarily 3 locations. One of them was Marble Hill because I thought it was pretty neat with the marble industries. This is Tate, which is a yard, which is where they bring the cars up. And Tate Yard, pretty much, they bring the cars up to Tate Yard and they hold them there until they're needed down at the marble companies. Then they move the cars down the hill, which in this case, on the real prototype, it's a switchback. And then after they load the cars, they bring them back up. They hold them in the yard for a little while till they get enough cars together, and then they make a trip down to Marietta, which is the CSX interchange on the railroad, where all the cars are picked up and dropped off. For the Georgia Northeastern, there's only one connection, which is CSX in Marietta. So a couple times a week, depending on traffic, they'll run a train down. It's pretty much an all-day train on the prototype where they take it down, they'll drop them off, and then sometimes they can make it down and back in one day. Top speed on the Georgia Northeastern is 15 miles an hour. So it makes a great little short line to model. The sand tower here was scratch built based on the prototype photos. Again, if you go onto my website, click on the prototype tab, you'll see the actual prototype sand tower. So I kind of took some pictures, rough measurements and stuff, and then I scratch built that. All the locomotives are custom painted. I did all the painting, decals and everything. They all have ESU lock sound decoders upgraded in them. If they didn't come with a lock sound decoder, they've got them in it now. The switcher, the NW2 is Broadway limited. The 6576 is an Athearn unit. 9706 here in the front is an Atlas unit. And then I got a couple more inside the shed there. These are all, again, based off the prototype units. When I first started off, I just picked some numbers and I wasn't happy with that. Decided I wanted to replicate the type a little bit better. So I picked the actual units, the unit numbers, and I've got a good number of the fleet. I think the total number of locomotives. Yes, I prefer the lock sound. I started off because I like the drive hold, and then I got tied up with the guys from Iowa Scaled Engineering, and the lock sound decoders are probably one of the better decoders to use for the proto throttle. Yeah, there's 10 prototype units, and I've got about 6 of them right now, 7 of them. The number 81 here is no longer on the roster. It was retired just before the years that I started modeling, but I just stretched the time period a little bit further. Best running loco, probably this 9706 right here in the front. This is one of the newer Atlas GP38s, and that one runs pretty nice. I like the Atlas. Also the Intermountain Paducah GP10, which I'll show you later. I am running, you can see it here, Digitrax, which does okay. I have an LNWI, which I can show you here real quick. Try to show you here. There's the LNWI, which is connected up to the proto throttle receiver. And you'll notice that there's an extra board there. That's a test board that I was checking out for Iowa Scaled, just to make sure that it was working. And of course it does. It works great. So, all right. We're moving around here, and this is the in the year that I modeled, the Tate Depot was basically abandoned and boarded up. So that's what I modeled. This is similar to the station that's there. It's not an exact copy of it. but the road, the photo for the road was actually taken on the prototype location here on Highway 53. I was standing just to the right of the station, took a picture of the road, and that's why I tied it into the road that's here. And a little bit of Photoshop editing, and it looks pretty close. Working my way around, I've got a little area right here, which is just some trees and stuff. And that's one thing that people don't talk about very much is negative space. Um, you want to have a little bit of space, even though it's a small layout. You want to have some areas that aren't very interesting. That gives you a feeling of moving between places. So this is just a little grove of trees. You got some trees between the track and the fascia here. So the train kind of disappears behind them for a little bit. So again, don't forget about that when you're building your layout to leave some negative space. Uh, the crossing signals are now I'm drawing a blank on them. Tomar, I believe, and then I used the Circuitron. I've got that information written down somewhere. I can answer you back later. But it's a photo eye. Again, one of the other things that I did was I added a switch here in the fascia to turn them off, because as you activate the layout, you hit a spot here, and there's photo eyes, and now you've got the lights going. Then there's another photo eye here and a third photo eye here, and that's completes the sequence. And then that'll sometimes shut it off there. And again, you'll see that. And the other thing with the grade crossings is it adds a little bit more to your operations, because you don't want to block the grade crossing for extended periods of time. So anyway, here's the river scene here. This is the Etowah River. Again, much compressed from the prototype. And again, I've gone from Marietta, which is Dow Chemical, which is the next industry over there, over to Tate, which basically cuts out about 40 miles of the railroad. So again, with a small railroad, you have to make some hard decisions and cut out industries and stuff. There was a grain facility that takes 25, 30 car trains at a time. It's just too big for me to model because it would have taken the whole layout. So I just cut it out. All right, here's Dow Chemical. Again, I'm hoping my internet connection hangs on here for me. Sorry about that. Dow Chemical. Again, this is down in Marietta, or just outside of Marietta. And they've got 5 spots for tank cars. Again, I had to compress it a little bit, got 3 spots. And again, this is, we'll call it kit bashed, proto freelanced a little bit. And it looks a little bit like the facility, but not an exact copy. And then if you've seen some of my videos here, inside this little hatch here, this is the operating mechanism for the gate. So when I turn the handle here, and again, it tells me to go clockwise. As I turn the handle, you can see the gate opens. And again, that's just done with Legos, a little gear mechanism, and it's nice and smooth. And it gives the crews one more thing that they have to do, along with operating the derails, checking the derails, and everything else. Another grade crossing here. This is Sawyer Road, which is actually the road that's just south of the facility. On my railroad, to the left is north, to the right is south, anytime you're facing the railroad. So I got another grade crossing circuit here. And then Capital Building Materials, which was in a model railroad article. The lumber racks were scratch built. There's some plans in the model railroader article on how to build them. A couple other guys have contacted me about building it, and I've gave them some helpful hints and tips and stuff. And I've seen the results, and they were very successful. They did a really nice job on it, basically using the information that I provided in the article. So it's always nice to see that I gave them some good instructions, and they were able to kind of follow it along. And again, you can modify it, make it your own to fit the area that you have. If I had to do it again, I might move this track out just a little bit more. See, when I reached across the gates went down. I would try to maybe move that crossing over, that siding over just a tiny bit, so that it gives a little more room between the side of the center beam flat cars and the structure for the forklift guy to be able to get the loads off without running into stuff. Derails are Alexander scale models. If you go onto my YouTube channel and look under operating gates and derails, I give you all the information on what model number exactly I gave you that I used to do the derails. They were designed as like a switch style derail, and I've converted them into a flip over style. Next one here, we'll cover ERB first, which is a scratch built slash kit bash from some Pike stuff kits. That's the one across the tracks there. That's a plastics facility on the Georgia Northeastern. Doesn't get a whole lot of cars, but a few, and they make safety products, plastic safety glasses, hats, cones, all kinds of stuff like that for the safety industry. Uh, the actual facility doesn't have a platform. I just wanted to put one there because some plastic industries do receive box cars of plastic goods in large cases and stuff. Not enough to warrant the use of a covered hopper, plastic covered hopper. If you also notice here, there's a wheel chock here. This is a neat little thing that I just made up. It's out of H column, and I just use a little sticky tack in there, and it helps stick to the rail, and it does a pretty good job of holding the car in place. Again, I wouldn't put several cars on a 2% grade, but it does work. Keeps the car from rolling. This is the Walther's. I believe it's called the Ready Mix plant, Blue Star Ready Mix, and then it was pretty heavily kit bashed. This office is actually supposed to be over here. I cut an extra door, changed the stairs around, added a stairway inside, moved a bunch of stuff around, and then I scratch built the unloading shed based on prototype photos. Again, one of the important things with an industry like this is you need to have room for the cars to be moved through the unloading area. And what I did was it doesn't work, but I've got a car puller replicated right here with a cable and a hook on it. And that's basically what would happen is the industry would take the car puller, put it down so you stop wobbling. Takes the car puller, hooks it up to the cars, and pulls them through as they're unloaded. Now, it could be done in either way, depending on which way the siding is going. Sometimes the cars will be moved towards the end of the spur. Sometimes they'll be moved towards the switch. So it all depends on the industry and which way the track wants to roll, because they prefer to use gravity. The other thing that's here is you've got a blue flag, which is over here, and it just clips onto the rail. And again, one more thing for the crews to consider. You need to stop and make sure the blue flag has been removed. And the purpose of the blue flag is it's indicating that a car is not to be moved until the blue flag is removed by the person or craft that installed it. In this case, if the Georgia Northeastern crew comes up here and the blue flag is still up, they can't touch it. They have to go inside, request somebody from the facility remove the blue flag, which indicates that the hoses have been disconnected. In this case, from the hopper car. They also use them for tank car unloading spots, and locomotive facilities. They'll put them on the tracks there, indicating a locomotive is not to be moved. Yes, the blue flag is scratch built. It's just a piece of piano wire bent with a little clip part that clips onto the rails, and the little sign part is just a piece of metal flashing that was glued on there. And again, it just kind of sits on the rail, just kind of clips on. That little leg helps hold it in place. The next industry here is I call it the for lease building. I've got comments, people saying that building's never going to be leased. Well, the for lease and the phone number and everything is actually what was on the prototype building when I built this. It has been sold and probably a couple of times, but again, scratch built, compressed from the original prototype. It's no longer rail served, and you see here there's a couple of ties still in the ground, but the rail's been removed. The switch has been pulled. So again, that's something interesting that most people don't model is having an industry that's no longer rail served. All right, coming on down here a little bit further is Georgia Metal Coaters. This is one of the major facilities on the Georgia Northeastern. There's actually 2 or 3 plants there in Marietta. This is the one that's off of I-75. If you're ever in Atlanta heading up I-75 through the Marietta area, if you look over to the west, you'll see the Georgia Metal Coaters building. Again, I had to flip some things around, but they do have an overhead door where the crew goes in, they open, or the facility opens up the overhead door, accesses the coil steel cars inside, and then pulls them out and sets them back in. And again, it's something interesting to open the door, as I've shown on a couple of videos. a rooftop ventilator is hooked up, and that's your drive shaft, and that opens the door if you turn the rooftop ventilator. And again, it'll open all the way up and down. And again, one more thing for the crew to just slow down and enjoy the operating session. Uh, Dairy Queen here. This is a Walters kit. It's actually pretty nice. Uh, the stonework on the front I thought was going to be a decal. It's not. It has to be hand painted each stone individually. So if you're going to buy the kit, just be aware. I also added an interior to it, some extra signs, and then over here on the side, I went to my local Dairy Queen on a Sunday morning and took a shot of their menu sign and then scaled it down to HO scale, and then got copies of their little enter sign and stuff. Those signs don't come with the kit, so again, added a dumpster with some cats in the dumpster. And then this area here, if you look from this side over to the other, you see there's a little access door there. That is where this, we'll call it a removable industry, goes. And again, there was an article in Model Railroader on that. So this goes across the doorway. I only put it up about every third or fourth operating session because it does block access in and out of the room. This represents Universal Alloy, which is a company that makes aircraft parts, and they ship them out on flat cars, and they need idler cars on each end because the load overhangs the ends by about a foot or two, or maybe a little bit more. So it creates extra work for the local crew. Got some friends that work there, and to switch out Universal, to pick up one car, you need to bring 3 cars with you, 2 for idlers and then 1 to leave for the next load. And then you got to split it, put the idlers in there, and it just takes some extra work. But again, it adds a little more interest to it. This over here is my car storage. All the cars are stored in drawers, and I've got them by different car types. So box cars, coil cars, tank cars, etc., all the way down. I've got about 100 cars stored in that one little storage area there. And then finally out here, this is the staging area here, which is where this is removable. This comes off. See, it attaches to the wall here, and then it's removable. And then you take that off, set it on the shelf, and then when I'm ready to operate, I put it out here. It takes just a couple minutes. There's an electrical connection. I've also got a shut-off switch for it that cuts the power off to it. So that pretty much is the tour of the railroad. Any questions before we get started on doing a little operating session? The car storage is actually, you can find it online on Walmart. There's several different versions of it. There's some that have bigger, deeper drawers. Here, let me show that again here a little bit. If you post a comment up on the video, I'll give you a link, or I'll give you the model number of what that specific unit is. All right. Well, let's talk about the switch list here. I'm gonna give you a quick tour here. The switch lists are just typed up using an Excel spreadsheet, and they're based upon the prototype forms. I was able to get access to the prototype forms, and so I use those to design these. I also had the good fortune of meeting the gentleman that designed the prototype forms. He actually came over and operated on the layout and helped me with setting them up. He does that as a business. Again, great information. I met him just going through YouTube. But let me, I'll show you real quick here on the form. This is for the North Local. This is going to be the job that we're going to be doing here in just a few minutes. In this case, I've got 4 cars that are shown in Elizabeth Yard, which is our interchange. So this technically would be what they would call a wheel report, which is what the engineer and conductor has. It shows where the cars are in their. But this is also part of my switch list. So in this case, what you're looking at is you've got 4 cars coming in, and it shows you where they're going to. So the first car is going to Capital, second car is going to ERB, and the third and the fourth car are going to Georgia Metal Coaters. And then over here it tells you whether they're flat, boxcar, gondolas, and what's in them. Total number of cars, including staging, I think it's about 30 or so. Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less. I have industries where I don't load them up. Not every industry is switched every operating session. I'm going to show you here on the switch list a little bit more. You'll see that there's several empty spots. And in this case, several of them, there's nothing gets set out there, nothing gets picked up, which is just the way it is on the prototype. So as you work your way down the list, the first industry starting from south to north is Georgia Metal Coaters. So if you look at Georgia Metal Coaters, you've got two cars. They're both going to CSX Elizabeth. That's ELI is Elizabeth. So basically what that's saying is these two cars need to be picked up. And you look in your consist over here and it shows you have two cars to set out. So that's a pretty simple pull and swap. So you're going to pull two cars, you're going to set out two cars. They're empty, and again, they're going to CSX Elizabeth. The next industry is Universal Alloy, which in this case, that's a removable industry. There's no cars listed there. They're not doing any business or not shipping anything, so there's no cars, and you don't have anything to drop off over there. West Oak is a runaround track, which I'll show you when we're operating. It is also used for off-spotting cars, for Dow and for any other industry. A little bit further down is the team track, which I'll show you here in just a minute. I forgot to show you the team track. Again, nothing shown on the team track. It's empty. There's no cars being set out there. And then Argos, you go down to Argos and you see there's two cars at Argos and it says block to Argos, which basically means they're still being unloaded. So they're not going anywhere. If it says block to Argos and they're at Argos, that means they're where they're supposed to be. They're not going anywhere. The question was, do I use track warrants during op sessions? What I do is I use a block sheet. So crews sign out on a block sheet. And in this case, the block goes all the way up just over the bridge. So you have the complete block. So you're able to go in any direction you want. There's no other trains. There's no through trains, nothing else to worry about. You just switch as you want. You can go in any direction. I can have up to 4 operators on the layout. And what I'll do is I'll have one crew operating Marietta over here, and I'll have another crew operating over in Marble Hill. And because the two don't actually interfere with each other, I've had as many as 4 people in here operating at the same time. I run a 2-person crew, one as engineer, and one as conductor. And again, more fun when you're doing the proto throttle. That way there, the guy can concentrate on that. All right, if you look over here, continuing on the industries, you got ERB, block to ERB. So that car is going to stay where it's at. At Capital Building Materials, you've got a couple of cars that need to be picked up because they're showing to block to CSX Elizabeth. And the last industry is Dow. And again, it shows they're all blocked to Dow, which means you don't have any work to do there today. And then on the bottom of the list, I added a little key which shows what all the different letters mean in case you're not familiar with it. HZ is hazard, HW is high and wide. And that's over here in this column. You see HZ, it's got a little star. That's indicating that's a hazardous material. When they do pick up that car that has the overhanging load over at Universal Alloy, it's marked off high and wide because it's a special handling car. I started the layout in 2013, and I basically was finished about a year, 2 years ago. And again, I don't think a layout's ever really finished. But here's one other thing I forgot to show you: the team track. Now there was a team track in Marietta, but it didn't have a loading ramp. I think it was just kind of an open area. I haven't really been able to get good information on it, but I was able to get information that just outside of Marietta on a Norfolk Southern line, there is we'll call it a team track, which serves a brick industry, which is a cement loading ramp. And then just down on that same spur is the concrete plant, Argos Cement. So I figured if it was close enough, I was able to just kind of work it out. Eventually, there'll be an article in Model Railroader magazine on how I built the concrete ramp. That was based originally upon an article by Lance Minheim. It's cast with anchoring cement. I made a form, poured it in there, just like pouring rock molds, except I was using cement. It looks like cement because it is cement, and then just weathered it up a little bit. And I don't think there's any way that you can duplicate cement any better. Again, it's pretty simple. You can make the form however you want, so you can customize it to the space that you have. Do I switch about 50%? Yeah, that's probably about right. Maybe 50. Some again typical to the railroad. You have busy days and slow days. So some days I'll make the switch list a little more full, and other days I'll make it a little less full. Also, it depends on the crews that are operating. If it's their first time operating here, I'll make it what I would consider an average session. If it's a couple of professional railroaders, I might make it a little bit harder because they know what they're doing. So make it a little more challenging for them. Let me show you here the derail a little bit closer. Maybe you can see it. It's pretty simple. I took the casting and basically cut off it was a little arm part here, drilled a hole in there, and then put a wire in there which makes a hinge, and then it just flips over and lays flat. Now it's kind of hard to get it to lay perfectly flat. It takes a little bit of work to do that, but once you got it, it's not bad. And yes, they do work. If you run a locomotive or a car over them, it derails, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. So that's one more thing the crew's supposed to take a look at and make sure. The other thing which you might see here on the railroad is the clearance points are marked with a yellow tie. So if you see here, again, that's based right on the prototype. They mark the tie. Of course, on the prototype, it's a little bit further back, but I put a car here, make sure I can clear it on the main. As long as the car is behind the yellow line, you're good, you're clear. And again, all the sidings are marked that way, not the main line. Basically, what I tell operators is you translate this across. So if you're behind this, basically where this tie comes across, you're behind there, you're clear for either side. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, thanks. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. What I'm going to try to do now is we're gonna we're gonna fire up the proto throttle. For those of you that aren't familiar, this is the proto throttle from Iowa Scaled Engineering. It's the best thing since DCC. I mean, lets you really feel like you're operating a real locomotive. What I'm going to do, let's set this down here, and then maybe we can see this here. All right, so you wake up the throttle, and in this case, there we go, a little better. All right, you turn this on, and then I have all my locomotives in here programmed in. So what I can do is I can scroll down, and I'm looking for my locomotive here, 7562, which is loaded in there, and then I'm going to go ahead and load them in. So all the configurations are set up there. Next, what I would do is I'll come over here and hit this button, and the engine will start up. If you give it a second. I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to hear the locomotive. You also have independent light controls. So if you look here, there's dim, bright, and bright with ditch lights. I also added ditch lights to all the locomotives, the ones that didn't come equipped with them, which is pretty much all of them. You also have an independent control of each light. So I can turn the rear light to dim. I can put the front light to dim. I can set them both. This is your throttle. This is your reverser. And then this is your brake, bell, and horn. This is for drive hold. I really don't use it very much. You can use it, but the way I've got these things programmed, you don't really need to use it. So once I start it, I hold the button and it takes me back to the start screen, which shows my locomotive number, the battery level, and then whether these functions are activated. What I've done is this is the coupler clank. Again, I don't know if you guys can hear that or not. And then you hit it again, and that's the air release from the air hoses separating. So we're going to get ready to go here. I go into forward. To the right is forward, which is the side where it says front. So if you're, in this case, my locomotive is set up to go forward. Notch up a couple of notches. Go ahead and turn on the lights to bright, and we're rolling here. A little hard to do this here, but basically apply the brake. I've gone to idle, I'm in forward, and I've got the brake applied. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate that the conductor who's riding over here on the front of the engine has gotten off, and he's going to go into Georgia Metal Coaters and get him to open up the door. Rather than going all the way by and he's got to walk all the way back, he wants to save walking. They're not blocking any grade crossing, so there's no problem with the train stopping right here. So he goes in and opens up the door, or one of the facility members will open up the door. While he's doing that, he's also going to inspect the cars to make sure that they're ready to go. The prototype crew is responsible for checking the cars, making sure all the doors are closed, everything's good. If it's not ready to go and the industry has called for it to be picked up, they can refuse to pick it up, and then the industry also has to pay a charge for not having the car ready. So again, it all comes back to money. The railroad doesn't want to waste their time going to pick up a car when it's not really ready to be picked up. So anyway, so now he's gotten back on. Lets the engineer know he's back up and ready to go. And doing these little extra steps, you know, seems like it's slowing things down and kind of taking some of the fun out of it, but I don't think so. I think it adds to an operating session, and it makes a small layout operate like a larger one. So now again, we're going to come over here to the switch, and we're going to stop here at the switch so that the conductor can get off. Again, if you've seen my videos, I move the conductor around and kind of describe what they would be doing so that you get a better idea of what a prototype crew does. I was fortunate that I worked for the Blue Ridge Scenic and got to do some of the things that a prototype conductor does by switching, calling car counts, doing that kind of stuff. Again, a lot more work on the prototype when you're doing switching. I worked on a passenger, scenic passenger railroad, so we didn't do a whole lot of switching. But stopping and doing these kinds of things and car counts and stuff, I think just adds to the fun. So let me see if I can get this back here a little bit so you can kind of see. All right, so I've got my brake applied. I'm going to release the brake. I'm going to say that I dropped my conductor off. And again, you'll notice there's a little bit of a lag as the engine accelerates up even after I notched up. That's just like it is on the prototype. There's a few second delay from each time you notch up. So now the crew's going to pull forward. The conductor would be over here calling car counts, saying how many more cars to stop. And as he gets closer, we're getting down to 2 cars. We're going to start notching back down 1 car, half a car. They're going to call for it a little bit early, and then it's going to ease in, and they'll say that'll do once he's clear of the switch. You notice also there's a red flag on the end of the train. Again, that's same thing they do on the prototype. You have to have something to indicate the end of your train. So now the conductor would line the switch, and he'd walk back down, line the other switch, and he's going to guide the move from back here towards the warehouse. So what we're going to do, release the brake, we're going to change to reverse, and we're going to back up. So as the crew gets closer, they're going to start slowing down. And one of the other things that we're going to do here is we're going to do a safety stop 1 car length before coupling up. Again, easing onto the brake, we're going to stop there. The idea behind that is you're just going to check to make sure that everything is good, that they've got the cars under control, and that way there, when they make the coupling, they're not going to make it at a high rate of speed. The engineer's got everything easily under control. So again, I'm going to try to show you the proto throttle here as I'm doing this. What was that again? Have to get Scott to jump in there on that one. I'm not sure. All right, let's see if we got a good joint there. So now the conductor would go back, release the handbrakes, check that he's got a good joint. In this case, we would say it's centered and set. So the reverser is centered, the brake is set, and then they would also do a third step. If they had a field generator, they would cut that switch out. You would go between the cars and make the air hoses. Again, that's a very dangerous position. It's in what they would call a fouling position. So anytime you're in a fouling position, you need to request red zone or three-step. Depending on the railroad, they'll call it by different things. It's the same thing. It's just different names on different railroads. So they'll call for a three-step or red zone. The engineer will answer back three-step or red zone, good, okay to step in. They step in, lace up the air hoses, release the brakes. And again, just taking a few seconds to replicate that doesn't take a whole lot of time, but it gives, again, a little bit more of a prototypical feel to it. So the handbrakes are released. They would say, go ahead and pull. So brakes released. We're going to go ahead and pull forward. All right. And now you can kind of see the cars coming out. And as we get clear, and the conductor probably in this case would be riding the last car as they come out, and he'd be calling down to the engineer how many car lengths to a stop. And what we're going to do here is we're going to set the cars out on the main. So as he gets closer, he's going to start throttling back down, goes to idle. And again, notice that the locomotive is still coasting until I apply the brake. I've got a high deceleration programmed in. It's set to max. All right, so we're good there. We've lined our switch back to neutral. We're going to change to reverse, release the brake, and we're going to go ahead and back up. I talked to the prototype crew. It says depends on whether the crew has been nice to him or not. If it's cold and they weren't very nice to him, he leaves the door open. If they've been nice to him, he will close the door once they're finished doing the switching. So it can be done by the conductor. All right. So once we get the cars in the clear here on the main, again, I'm looking for my yellow tie on the siding. And once I'm sure I'm clear of it, I'll go ahead and apply the brake. And this is something that you don't see on the videos. Is I use a bamboo skewer to make and break or make my cuts. I don't use magnets. Again, I believe in the simpler is better routine. So again, we've got the cut made. We're good. We're going to go ahead and have them pull ahead. And also the conductor would have set the handbrakes and they would have made a securement test, which means they're making sure that the cars don't roll away once they cut away from them. And taking a little bit of time to do that just adds another step to your procedure. All right, so now we're good. We're lined back. Everything looks good. We're clear. You can back on up, and the conductor would call clear for however many cars, 5, 6 cars. And he would be observing the move, making sure that everybody stands clear. It's really hard when you're switching an industry with a lot of people moving around and stuff. They have to be really careful that they don't run somebody over because they may not be paying attention. They may have hearing protection in, especially when a lot of stuff's going on inside the plant. So again, they want to do all this really slow and safe. So again, here we'll do a stop, make sure everybody's clear. Going to ease the brake on here. All right, so we're good. And then we're going to just ease it on into the, now in this case, what I'll do is I'm going to offset the coupler. So that when I reach in, once I get the car set underneath the overhead door, I don't have to try to make that uncoupling. You notice also this is a excess height car. So when I cut the door opening, I took my highest car and made sure that it would clear so I don't hit the door. And again, we're just going to ease it on in there. Once we're clear the door, we're good. They would set the handbrakes. They do a securement test, make sure everything's good. You notice also the locomotive would have its bell ringing just again to make sure it's safe in the area, warn people. And we're clear. So we're going to go ahead and pull ahead. Get them. Again, as I get closer to where I want to stop, I start notching down, go to idle, and again here you'll notice that it's still rolling pretty good until I apply the brake. In this case, we shut the bell off. All my switches are micro engineering and they're operated by that little spring that's in there, so that everything is thrown by hand. Again, that's not something that you see in my videos because I'll cut that part out as I move the switch. If you look on the videos, it looks like they move automatically. No, it's just a little spring switch. Again, I go for simpler is better. So again, we're going to ease it on in here. Now we don't have to do a safety stop here because we've already handled these cars and the crew knows that the brakes are set and everything's good to go, so they can just ease on in. They may want to go ahead and do a stop, just kind of control the coupling. We're good there. What was the question? All the track is micro engineering code 70. On the Georgia Northeastern, they have pretty light rail, so that's what I wanted to replicate. And the code 70 works really well. You could go to code 55 if you wanted to on the sidings, but I really didn't think it made much difference. One of the things, and I'll show you here real quick. All right, while we've got the locomotive stopped, let me show you one thing over here. Again, it's a little hard to see until I get set up here. But if you notice right here, all the track that you're seeing is all code 70. If you look at the track in front of ERB, it doesn't look like 70. It looks like 55. That's because I put some ballast over the ties. I added some weeds and grass and stuff like that. And that track is laid on the roadbed or on the base layout base. The main line is laid on cork. So you get that standard ballast profile. It's up above, above the ground. The sidings there in the back, and also this one up here in the front by Argo Cement is all, again, code 70, but I just cover it up with ballast, and it looks like a lot smaller profile rail. All right, so now there's a couple different ways we can do this, but what we're going to do is come in, make our cut here, pull forward. And what we're going to do is we're going to run around the consist because our next move is a facing point turnout. So we need to get around the cut of cars so that we can work them from the good end, if you will. All right, once we're clear of that switch, we're going to stop, line the switch over, release the brakes, bump it up to a couple of notches. One of the other things that I've done is I've got my locomotive set so that when I go up through notch 4, I get a speed increase. 5, 6, 7, and 8, you hear the RPMs go up, but the speed of the locomotive doesn't change. My locomotives are topped out at about 13 miles an hour, and that was a speed table that was given to me by Joe Atkinson. So we would have stopped over here and allowed the conductor to throw the switch. I was just demonstrating that. So here we go. We're going to come around. And again, the crew would want to come up to this turnout here and stop to line the turnout. A lot of times you'll see guys at operating sessions, they'll walk, 5, 10 feet ahead of their locomotive throwing the switches. That's not how the real railroad works. The guys have to walk, and it's a lot of walking. So they'll bring the engine up as close as they can, get off, and save the conductor having to walk, especially when he has to do that all day. Every step he saves is precious. So now the locomotive's going to switch over. He's going to take the crossover. Now that track that he was on was called West Oak, and sometimes there could be cars set out there. So again, that adds another little twist for the crews that are operating, because they may have to move those cars. And again, I'm going to ease the brake on. All right, so we're lined back over. Again, I'm trying to give you guys a good feel for it. I don't know that I can get everything in the camera because I'm trying to run the train and the camera at the same time. We're going to ease up in here and make a nice coupling. And there we go. Good joint right there. All right. So again, neutral, brake applied, conductor can go down, make his air connections. Then what we're going to do, we've got a couple different ways that we can operate here. If you remember the switch list earlier, what it showed was right here. All right. So what you're looking at is ERB. The car is still supposed to stay at ERB, and then you've got the two cars to pull at Capital. They're all on the same siding. On the set outs, you got one car going to Capital and the other car going to ERB, and it needs to go to the loading dock. So we're going to have to move that covered hopper to access the other cars behind it. So maybe while I'm doing this, you guys could be thinking of how you would go about doing this, because we've got those two cars. The center beam obviously has to go to Capital Building Materials. The box car is going to ERB to the loading dock. And then we have to move the covered hopper to be able to pull these two. So okay, there's several different ways to do this, and everybody has their own way of doing it. Each crew will work a little differently, but here's one of the ways that I figured out how to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here. We're going to shove the two cars, the inbound cars, past the switch. But we're going to hang on to the two coil cars, and you'll see why in just a couple minutes. Now, the other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure I don't shove them too far, because that'll activate the grade crossing. So I want to get just past the clearance point here. And we're good right there, and we are still clear of the photo eye that activates the grade crossing, which again, on the prototype, they've got a grade crossing circuit. The crews try to avoid unnecessarily activating them where they're going to be blocking the cars. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go ahead and back up, brake release, we're going to pull back. The conductor also would have set the handbrakes on those cars and made sure that they weren't going anywhere before they made the cut. So that, again, another securement test. Now, there's a couple things that we're going to have to do before that switch is lined. So we're clear of the switch. Everything looks good. Now, normally people would just run right in there and grab the car, but there's a couple of things. Remember, the blue flag was up? You still got the blue flag. So the conductor is going to have to walk down and ask why the blue flag's still up if they've asked to be switched. Also, the gate to the industry is closed. Before they line the switch, they need to come and open the gate. The reason behind that is if they bump the car and it rolls, they don't want it to roll into the fence and tear it up. Yes, they would use the horn. Again, it depends on if there's people around and what kind of communication they're using. If they're using radios, a lot of times they wouldn't do that because they've got the radio. But if they're using hand signals, the engineer might blow the horn. Again, it's up to the crew. They normally would discuss that prior to doing their switching operation. So in this case, the industry guy comes out and he's going to remove the blue flag and let them know that it's good to go. Do I have a no? You just, if you look right there between the rails, about 4 ties clear of the coupler, you can see the photo sensor. Again, I'll just show the crews that when they're switching. A lot of times on the prototype, they'll have a plate or something there which will show it. So now the other thing that we want to do is we're going to open up the gate. So again, come down here, open up the cover, turn the handle clockwise, and we're going to open up the gate. And again, the little gates, the derails, all that other stuff just adds one more prototypical step. Again, it really wasn't that hard to do. I mean, it was just, you had to do a little engineering to figure it out and hook it up, but it's just sitting on a little shelf. If you watch my video, there's one that shows how the mechanism operates from underneath. All right, so now we're clear. The conductor's come down. He's checked these cars, made sure there's no junk left on them. All the tie down cables have to be secured. Everything has to be good to go. They want to check, make sure everything's good. They've got their this car over here set. They know they're good. Now he would walk back and he'd line the switch. Once he's got the switch line, he'd call for the locomotive to come ahead. And normally they're going to give directions, or they should give directions in the direction that the locomotive is facing. So in this case, this is forward, so he would tell the engineer to come ahead. The only power switches that I have that turn off track power are the ones in the locomotive service area and the staging cassette. All the other power is on. I have 4 power districts. So Marietta is 1 power district. The engine yard is 1. Tate is another one, and then the Peninsula is the 4th one. So there's 4 power districts. I've got the Digitrax circuit breaker system set up. All right, so now we've coupled onto that car. Oops, now we did it. I didn't pull my wheel chock. There's going to be a write-up coming for that one. The wheel chock works just like a derail. That's what you get when you try to do too many things at one time. That's why I have a conductor that just does conductor jobs and the engineer just does the engineer job. So we're going to ease on in here and see if we can make a good connection. See if I do better on the coupling than I did on the. There we go. That's better. Centered and set. Crew's going to go back, check everything, release the brakes, lace up the airlines, and we're good to go. So we're going to tell them go ahead and pull. Going to start the locomotive bell ringing. Oh, we had a connection. Okay. We'd have to go back and make that join again. Just to save time, I'm just going to go ahead and say we made it the first time. All right. Oh, I already messed up. That's 2. That's 2. I already messed up. Yeah. I got you. See, I already messed up on my switch moves. Yep. I'm gonna have to call my union rep. So we're gonna go ahead and this is what I should have done the first time here. Hold on. I should have coupled on to the covered hopper. Yeah. You see why I work with 2-man crew? I can't do 2 things at the same time. I can't even do 1 thing at the same time. All right. All right. We're going to try this again. Here's the deal. We bring this guy out and we'd hook him up to the 2 cars that were already set out on the main. There we go. So we've got our connection there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and shove these guys across the grade crossing because we're going to have to do another maneuver here. So in this case, the conductor would be riding point protection. He'd be coming over here riding the end of the car, and telling the engineer he's clear to shove them through the crossing. All right, and then what I want to do is I want to shove these clear of the grade crossing. Most railroads have a requirement that they need to be at least 100 feet clear of the crossing. I shorten that up and say at least 50 feet, but in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to get them clear of the photo eye so that we're not continuing to block the traffic there. So once I see we're clear of the photo eye, we're going to go ahead and stop there, make our cut. That's what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to just couple on to the covered hopper and then come back over here. That way there we free up traffic. All right, we're clear of the switch. Come ahead. Now, if I'd done what I was supposed to do the first time, now it would have been going into the lumber yard and grabbing these cars. Since I already pulled them out, now they're going to be on the curve. It's going to be a little harder to couple to them, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. No, the those targets that you see there, those are the ones that come with the micro engineering turnouts. They do not move, but they look nice because they are pretty close to scale. All right, now we've got our cars. Make sure we're going in the right direction here. We've got a good pull. So now we're gonna pull our cut of cars out of here. And this will be the cut of cars that we're going to return back to the yard with. So these are all of our return cars, our pickups, whatever term you want to use. Again, once we get clear of the switch, we'll ease it to a stop. A lot of guys, think that the proto throttle, it's a little thick, but it fits in my hand pretty good. And what I do a lot of times is when I'm operating, I use my thumb to activate the brake lever, and I can get it almost all the way over. So it's not too bad. We go to neutral, we're going to go ahead. We've got our switch line, and we're going to go ahead and come forward. The other thing we wanted to do was we shut the a little hard to see now, but I had the ditch lights on. And again, there's no need for the ditch lights now because we've got a car in that position, so I can use the control here to just shut off the ditch lights. All right. Now again, there would be the conductor riding point protection, and you'd be calling down how many cars to a crossing, and if the crossing is activated, gates coming down, we're good. Engineer might just go ahead and blow the horn too, even though he's 4 cars away. He's going to go ahead and blow the horn. And we're going to start throttling down here because we're getting close to our connection here. And again, we want to stop short of the coupling because the conductor would be riding the move, so he'd want to stop so he can get off. Not supposed to make a coupling with the conductor riding on the car because you could get thrown from the car if the coupling is a little too hard. Okay, I'll show you here. 1 second. We're gonna see if we can make a good coupling here. Ease it in. Again, this is a nice thing with the proto throttle. You see how nice that joint is there? I can control it with the brake. There's a what they call a love handle on the back of the throttle, and if you notice here, put my finger in here, and again, that helps hold it to my hand. The other thing that I do is I'll take this, wrap it around my hand because I don't want to bounce this thing off the floor. All right, so now I've got a leash here. That way there, if I were to drop it, it would just fall right here. And again, it doesn't bother me by having it wrapped around my wrist like that. All right, so now we've come forward. Now we're going to go ahead and back up. Again, go ahead and start off here nice and easy. Check our connections. We're good. So that we can start notching up on the throttle. We've got a pretty good pull here, so we're going to be riding along. Conductor would have checked the consist and would probably be riding this last car, calling out. So again, here as I'll be watching the cars. In this case, I got about five cars. Four more. Conductor would be calling out 3 cars. Again, as you start getting closer on the car count, you start notching down. 2 cars. Again, you want to call them a little bit ahead. That way there, the engineer has time to respond to it. And then as we got 1 more car, we could just go ahead and kick it over here into idle here in just a second. Again, nice and easy here. There's no rush on this. So now we're clear. We can apply the brake. We line this over. Now we're going to tell the engineer we're going to come ahead, so we're in the forward position here. Release the brake. We're going to go ahead and notch up a couple of notches. Again, apologize for moving the camera, but trying to, as you see, I can't do too many things at one time. So, all right, so here we go. We're going to ease on in here. We'd also go ahead and start the bell ringing because we got people moving around. Correct. Yes. When I put it to idle, it'll eventually stop, but it'll take a long time. So what I do is I'll ease on to the brake. Again, I've maxed out CV4, which is deceleration, to 255. So it's just going to keep rolling and rolling until I apply the brake, which is one of the neat things with the proto throttle here, is that you actually feel like you're using the brake and controlling the train. So again, as I'm getting close here, I'm going to start notching down. I'm getting close to the end here. We've got about a half a car length. I'm going to start applying the brake a little bit more. Now, one feature with the proto throttle, if you go all the way over to the right, it goes into emergency brake. That'll put the brakes on right away. I leave that on there. You can program that in or out. I like to leave it on there. That way there, it keeps people from apologizing that they shove cars off the layout. If it gets out of control, they can always slam it over here. It puts the emergency brake on. But it's not like other systems. When you hit emergency, it shuts the whole thing down. This just stops the locomotive immediately, which is a really neat feature. But again, if you don't need that, if you're the only one operating your layout and you want to take it out, you can program it out very easily. Alrighty, so now we're gonna back up, release the brake, and we're gonna go ahead and we've made our cut, we've done our securement test, we've made sure the car's not gonna go anywhere, handbrake was set, and we're gonna pull forward. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna spot up the boxcar right at the loading dock, right about there. And now you kind of see why I moved that car out, because now I've got the boxcar in position and also respotted the covered hopper where it needs to go, back under the where the unloading hoses are. So again, we'd set the handbrakes, make sure the cars aren't rolling anywhere, and then we could go ahead and pull our cut back out. And then once we're clear, we're going to have to return the switch back to normal. And normal is for the straightaway route. So we're going to go ahead and stop here. Reset that. The other thing that we would do now also is they would close the gate. So they may have to walk back to close the gate. Sorry about that. And we can go ahead and close the gate now that we know the cars are secure. No one's going to roll into the gate, and we're good to go. So now we got one more thing that we need to do before we're done. You can shut the bell off here for a second. I can get my little red flag here. The red flag is just a piece of wire bent into an N shape. And what it does is I've got the little flag attached to it, and then that just drops right over the coupler. Again, if I can get it on there. Yes, the for the program, for the sound effect, setting the brakes and doing all that other stuff, it's called the Train Crew app. It's done by Ed Kopinski, and you can find that link on my last video that came out, or on my website. But anyway, you can just go onto that, and that gives you the handbrake sound effects, the setting, the releasing. You can also do brake tests. There's a bunch of different stuff on there, so it's a really neat program, and it gives you the the feeling of actually working as a train crew. So now we've got everything set. We've got our consist made up. We've done our brake check. Got our flag in the last coupler. So we're ready to head back to the yard. In this case, we're going to pull back to the yard. Sorry about that. We're moving. But we're going to pull back to the yard. The Georgia Northeastern does it that way, so that's why I replicate it. There is a runaround track in the yard. On my staging cassette, there's not one. But when the North Local, which is this train right here, is done, we don't run it again during the session. So even though the locomotive is effectively trapped in the yard by the cars behind it, it doesn't really matter, because that locomotive is not going to be run anymore during that session. So now what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and head back to the yard. So again, moving our reverser to reverse, take the brake off, notch up. There's one. And again, notice there's a little bit of a delay. And each notch, you get a sound increase and a little speed increase, again, all the way up into notch 4. And then after that, you just get the sound. Again, we would, in this case, have the rear headlight set to bright. And then the locomotive comes out into the staging. And I do have a end of the world protector over there, which is a piece of plexiglass, so the train doesn't run off the end of the staging cassette. Now I can also use this staging cassette outside for photos, which is what I've done. And it gives me a nice, it's I think 5.5 feet, so it's a pretty good size staging cassette. And again, great photo prop. All right, so let's see if we can see this here. So when I'm done, I'm going to turn the lights off. This is in idle. Reverser set to neutral. In this case, I've released the brake. I don't want to have the brake on when I finish with the locomotive. I push this button up here. And again, I don't know if you guys can see that. And I hit this button here, which is engine off. So that turns the locomotive off. Now for this, if you guys are familiar with Digitrax, you have to dispatch the locomotive. There's not a dispatch feature on here. So what I've done is I've programmed in a dummy address, which in this case is in slot number, it's locomotive 000. So what I do is I acquire that locomotive. So now I've released the locomotive that I have, so it could be acquired by another throttle. And now I have a dummy locomotive in here, which is 000. So that way there, again, it's dispatched from the throttle. Now, if you leave the throttle in this position, your throttle in idle, reverser in neutral, park, the brake doesn't really matter. The throttle will go to sleep in 5 minutes. There's a couple of AA batteries inside here. You have to remove these screws and access the battery. I've done at least 3 or 4 operating sessions without having to change the battery, and those operating sessions can last from 2 to 3 hours. So you could pretty much run the throttle for almost 8 hours, or maybe even more, and not have to change the batteries. I'm used to the Digitrax where you have to change that 9-volt battery all the time. So again, you can see the room really is not that big. So that's one of the things that people are impressed with, is it's not a very big room, but when you see the videos, it looks a lot bigger on the videos. So that's a 360-degree view of the layout. The backdrop on this center peninsula is below eye level, and that was done because now it makes the room seem more open. If I brought the backdrop up higher, then this would have been more of a canyon-like setup. So I wanted to keep it open. Again, I've got a couple of different lights. I've got fluorescent and also track lights. And again, it gives me a nice balance of light. What I shoot my videos with is exactly what you see here. It's again a good balance because you've got 2 different types of light. And then this is the other thing here, which maybe you haven't seen. These are all my DCC components here, and it was put on a pull-out shelf. So I can roll this out. All my electronics done at a workbench, and then I brought it here, and all I had to do was connect up to the different zones. In this case, electrical zones. So it is 54 inches high. The question was, what is the height of the bench work? It's 54 inches high, which gives me room. Inside that cabinet right there is all my modeling supplies, paints, glues, all that other stuff. And then I have a little workbench over here. And that's where I do all my work, with where the wife is with the computer. She was very nice in helping me tonight. So again, that pretty much is the tour of the layout. If you got any more questions, don't hesitate to comment on the video, or shoot me an email, contact me through my website. Again, go to thomasklamosky.com and you can check out all sorts of stuff there. Any other final questions or comments before we sign off here? Yeah, well, we'll talk about that. Scott Thornton can answer that probably better than I can, but yes, the throttle is a little bit expensive. The throttle is $482, and then you also have to have a receiver, which is $100. So yeah, you're looking at over $500. But if you buy a brand new locomotive, you're looking at probably about $250, $300, depending on the model. So 2 locomotives equals 1 proto throttle. You use the proto throttle every operating session. If you notice here, I didn't move any of those locomotives. I would gladly trade a locomotive for a proto throttle if I had to make that call, that call. But to me, it's worth it because it's something you use at every operating session. For me, it gives me the realism that I'm looking for. Everybody makes choices. I mean, it's not for everybody, but if you really like operations and you really like, feeling like you're an engineer, it's hard to beat it. And again, a lot of people knock it. They haven't tried it. That's the real test. Get a proto throttle at one of the shows, or try one out from a friend or something, and then you can really make a good decision. I had a guest come by here, and he's like, no, it's kind of expensive. I don't really want it, whatever. I showed him the throttle. He was running it for about 10 minutes. He was laughing, giggling, had a huge smile on his face. He said, I don't care how much it costs anymore. I got to get one. So till you try it, and again, some people it's not what they want, and I understand that. That's perfectly fine. Everybody has a different way of doing things. Everybody likes something different. That's one of the nice things with the hobby. If you like to weather cars, some people are do phenomenal jobs at weathering. Some people enjoy operations. Some people are collectors. So again, it's all in how you enjoy the hobby. There's not a wrong way to do it. As long as you're having fun and you're enjoying it, that's all that really matters. So all right. Well, appreciated you guys tuning in. Sorry for that little technical problem at the beginning. Again, I guess I didn't pull the kite string tight enough on our tin can connection, but I'm glad I was able to get it going back again. Again, appreciate you guys hanging in there with me while we were trying to get this thing straightened out. Again, any other questions or something, if you think of something later, just again, contact me through my website or post a comment here on the videos. I do try to respond to all of them. And again, thanks you guys for hanging in there with me, and hope you have a good evening. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.